as the dogs howled. There was once, up high above Reykjavik, a farm that many men said should have been the most profitable in all of Iceland. For there was a deep crop of grass for the sheep to eat by daylight or by moonlight. And although the dogs howled to go at that place, for there were old barrows there, it seemed like it should have been the best of farms. And Thorgerd, a scion of old Egil Skakkelgrimsson, bought the farm with old silver. But try as he might, he could not make it prosper. For the sheep seemed to go ill when the moon shone high. And men whispered there must be some sort of ghost, some old haunting from those old barrows in the hills, that none would go past, but would make the dogs bark and bark and bark. Well, in the end, Thorgerd thought, I'm going to have to send out a shepherd. And none would come. For there was a fear in those hills. But at last, on a feast day, a great tall man strode into his halls, a veritable cliff troll of a man, his head hidden. And the man, who all the dogs in the hall barked at, said, I am Glaumr. Will you let me into your hall? For I have come to offer to be a shepherd. And Thorgerd said, well, yes, of course, full, yes, come into the feast. And Glaumr said, I will not eat yet. But if you will give me what food I choose, and welcome me into your hall, Thorgerd, will look after your sheep by day, and even more by moonlight. And Thorgerd said, well, all right, yes, all right. If that is all the payment you want, you may look after my sheep, yes. Yes, I was going to give you silver. And Glaumr strode off. And from that time, the sheep seemed to do better, much better. For all the dogs barked when Glaumr was seen, and he was never seen by day, and seldom seen in anything other than hard moonlight. The months passed, and Thorgerd all but forgot the shepherd in the hills. Oh, he took the sheep himself, and Glaumr by day, and Glaumr was never there, and they prospered greatly. Now it was upon a feast day that suddenly he heard a loud knock upon his door, and he had his men opened it, and a figure stood in the moonlight. They could not really make out the details of his face, and it seemed more moon shadow than man, dark and blue in the hard silver light. But Thorgerd said, it must be Glaumr. Come in, my man, come in. It is feast day, and you have come to claim your reward. You are welcome in my halls. Take what food you need. And Glaumr came into the halls, and it was like some old, cold glacier, stood like a block of ice. Such was the cold blast men felt in their hearts. Only Thorgerd's wife kept her manners and said, You've come, we can offer you such meats. And Thorgerd, yes, we have beef and lamb and duck and chicken and Of course, deer that we've hunted, and even wild boar. Now which would you have? Or all of them? And Glaumr's teeth shone as if he was smiling, and said, I want none, for I will take my own. And then he reached out, and before anyone could stop him, he took the youngest of the serving men and twisted his neck, killing him instantly. And then he stalked off into the moonlight. Now Thorgerd called his men to arms, and they ran off. But there was nothing. Only the shadow of a form going back up the hill to where the barrows are. Now from that day, by moonlight, men dreaded Thorgerd's hill, for always there was a man missing in the morning, taken, none knew how or where. In the shadow he was taken. And Thorgerd put out a great prize, a reward for the one that would free his halls. Now it happened, at that time, mighty Grettir, who was unlucky at cards if mighty at war, had run out of luck and had no money. So he came at last to Thorgerd's chambers and said, I have heard, my sire, that you will offer me great reward if I will rid you of your ghost. And Thorgerd said, yes, but you're a noble man, and many have tried and died in their attempt. Do not try it. And Grettir said, I have sworn on all that I have wholly left in my heart, on my mother's memory, to rid you of this ghost, and so I can or die. And Thorgerd said, all right, I have a scheme. I think the creature has no power by the dark of the moon, and we are more or less certain it lives in the old barrow. Let us ride up tomorrow night, when there is no moon in the sky, and see what we can, taking lanterns, and I will give you a sword my grandfather got, from his great-grandfather Egil. A silver sword. Such is mighty against such creatures. And so, with lantern and silver sword, they rode off into the barrow, and they explored it long in the dark of the moon. And there was nothing. They saw no one. And they rode home, and Thorgerd said, well, maybe that's a good sign. Maybe the ghost has gone. No, said Grettir. It takes more than honest hearts fighting it to drive such a creature away. Let us go when the moon is waxing gibbous, for then mighty charms are made and lost. And so it was. They went as the moon was waxing gibbous. At that time the dogs bark most fiercely at the moon. And they went then up to the hall, to the barrow, and they found that the hall seemed to have got longer, and there were chambers they hadn't guessed, lit up by the moonlight, coming in through what chinks they could not imagine. And so it was all night they looked at that chamber and saw nothing. Coming out at last at dawn, they were their horses, and their throats had been bitten out as by a mighty teeth of some bear. Or Grettir looked at it and said, more like some old human with teeth as long as hate. And Thorgerd said, Glaumr was here. And Grettir said, we will come when the moon is full at last. And so it was. They rode up in the hard moonlight of the full cold moon. Coming at last to the hall, Grettir took his stand by the low lintel door that was made of earth and stone, for he was sure that Grettir's power came from the moon, and that if he was going to come, he would appear there where you could see the moon shining into the barrow. And so he looked long at that door, and he realised that it was made mostly of earth, and that a mighty blow in the right place would bring it tumbling down. Well, the moon came out, shone bright, filled the land with a silver light. And as the night built, Grettir got ready with his sword. Looking always at the door. But suddenly he heard something like a cry behind him, and he looked! And the moon was shining through some strange crack in the ceiling. And as he shone, he saw the shadow, and out of the shadow an evil face. Suddenly, a beard, and then a long cold hand came towards him, with claws clutching him, dragging him to an old, hard mouth, with teeth as sharp as stalactites and cold breath that seemed to freeze his heart. All he could do was cry out, "The moon!" And Thorgerd took off his cloak, stuffing it into the roof, holding it to stop it falling, blocked out the moonlight. And then Grettir felt his strength return, and with all that strength he threw Glaumr over his shoulder. But he threw him towards the door, and Glaumr, in the full moonlight, gained his own strength, and then he grabbed Grettir in his turn, and putting him before him, started to take him out, meaning to lead him, to push him out of the door of the barrow into the hard moonlight, where Glaumr's strength was at its greatest. But as he was forced towards the door, Grettir remembered what he had seen, and he kicked with both his hands both sides of the door, striking then the stone that held the whole construction in place. The lintel collapsed, the moon was shut out, and in the sudden dark and all but lantern, Grettir felt his strength return. He then stood right up, pulling Glaumr off his feet, and then he tossed Glaumr back, throwing himself back at the same time. Now Glaumr was made of evil moonlight, but Glaumr was made of bone, and Glaumr's backbone struck a mighty rock that served as a table in the barrow, and there was a crack sound, and Glaumr lay, bones broken, unable to rise, and over him stood Grettir the Strong, with his silver sword out. And Thorgerd smiled, laughed, and moved his hands. And just at that moment his hand caught the cloak, and it tumbled down, and the moon shone one last time, straight at the head of Glaumr, even as Grettir moved to cut it off. And as the silver sword flashed down, the eyes of Grettir met the eyes of Glaumr, and a curse Glaumr uttered to Grettir. "Though you hew my head, the moon watches, as the moon will always watch your doings, O Grettir the Strong. For you may slay me now, but it will not be forgotten. Fear then the moon, and the power of hate it brings." And Grettir struck off his head there, and dug them out of the barrow. Next morning they took the bones of Glaumr, whether they be old or new they did not know, and burned them in a mighty fire that seemed as the bones burned to burn cold, not hot. And Grettir shivered, and taking his gold and the silver sword Thorgerd gave him, strode off. But men say he was haunted from that day by moonlight, that he could not look at it without fear, and in that fear at last he was caught and killed.